Historic, successful, and weird. This is Peugeot, and today we will summarize and celebrate their history at Le Mans. The story of Peugeot begins almost a century ago in 1926. This was the year of their debut at Le Mans, where they ran a 3.8-liter four-cylinder known as the Type 174S. Unfortunately, both cars DNF'd, and Peugeot would not return with the factory effort for a very long time. Instead, for the better part of the century, they acted solely as an engine supplier, lending their hand in this project, and this, and a little less obscurely, this car. Here is the infamous WM-P88, the car that set and still holds the record for the fastest ever top speed recorded at Le Mans. The drivetrain was built by a team of volunteer Peugeot engineers and, strapped for resources during its development, decided that trying to be competitive at Le Mans was simply a lost cause. However, the project continued and the team would shift their ambitions to simply breaking the speed record. The speed record at Le Mans is still unbroken to this day and will likely remain etched in history forever. After the 1988 24 Hours of Le Mans, Peugeot announced a return to form, this time with a ground-up program where they'd be fully involved. They targeted 1991, building their car around the new rules of the World Sports Car Championship. When we think about Group C, we actually want to think about two different eras, with a major change of regulations being the dividing line. Before this change, the general idea was that engineers can build virtually any engine specification, so long as their car met specific fuel consumption regulations. These rules fostered variety, while also ensuring that teams could find ways to cut costs and be innovative. These are the years we think of when we remember the Porsche 956 or the Mercedes C9. The 1991 season was met with a set of rules that would change the series drastically. Contrasting the larger engines and insane turbos of before, rules now coerced the top class into running strictly 3.5-liter naturally aspirated engines, oddly similar to those run in F1 at the time. The FIA still allowed the outgoing obsolete cars to be grandfathered in to ensure a more filled grid. The problem was that these older entries had their engine performance nerfed. Essentially, to be competitive under the new rule set, teams would have to adapt. Why this rule set was put into place is full of hot takes and conspiracies, a video for next time. Regardless, Jaguar and Mercedes-Benz built cars to comply with the new rules. There was one more player. The 905 was by far one of the most iconic cars of the era. However, in its beginning days, it was a mismanaged nightmare, plagued with reliability issues. Despite a lucky win in its full season debut at Suzuka, the 905 could barely finish a race. In the first 5 races, car number 5 had 2 DNFs while car number 6 had even worse luck, going 6 for 6 on not finishing at all. It wasn't just unreliable either, consistently outpaced by their main competitor, Jaguar. As if matters weren't already bad, Peugeot would double DNF at Le Mans that year, their home race. Peugeot engineers and bosses had grim first impressions of the project. Luckily, Peugeot had already signed off on plans to continue their program. Cue the heavily revised 905B. This is the 905 we all know, with the oval front lamps, rounded lines, and enormous rear wing. The one in Gran Turismo. The aerodynamic changes are evident, but under the hood, it had improvements there as well, to both its gearbox and engine. The second half of the 1991 season would be night and day, where Peugeot would go on to secure a 1-2 in 2 of the last 3 races. A promising end to the season, but not enough to make up the lost ground to snatch the title from Jaguar. Leaving the 91 season on such a high note afforded Peugeot the momentum they needed. In 1992, they unveiled their 905 Evo 1B, this time with minor updates to the outgoing model. Reigning champions Jaguar were absent, calling it a day on a high note at the end of last season. Mazda and Toyota showed up, but lacked the backing needed to be competitive. The 905 went on to snatch 5 out of the 6 races that season, including the hard-fought 24 Hours of Le Mans. To end a near-perfect season, Peugeot would walk away with the title. Amongst their success, however, Peugeot began to see some writing on the wall. The running costs of the 3.5-liter engines put a huge financial strain on the top teams. They were also complicated to work on, and it wasn't clear why they'd been imposed in the first place. This led to shrinking grid numbers and lowering interest from everyone. At the end of 1992, the World Sports Car Championship folded. The beginning of the end of the Group C era. Interestingly, Peugeot had been developing a much wilder 905 Evo 2 in 1992. But with the World Sports Car Championship nearing its end, they decided to kill the program. Peugeot would run their last season of Group C again with the Evo 1B. Peugeot would win Le Mans one more time that year, embedding them into the dying days of Group C and sports car history entirely. So what about that Evo 2? Their cancelled project set for 1993 was set to pick off where the successful Evo 1 had left off. This project was nothing short of revolutionary and, as we'll soon find out, very ahead of its time. It took aerodynamics to new dimensions. It had a high nose akin to a Formula car with huge openings behind the wheel arches. The bodywork covered the rear wheels and there were large venturi tunnels beside the cockpit. As it turns out, Peugeot had been implementing daring designs decades before we thought. It appeared barely legal to race. It's only wondering what would have been had it competed. As we all know, Peugeot and their unique design philosophies would make a comeback soon enough. Maybe sooner than we think. Let's fast forward to 2006. We've moved from Group C to GT1 and now to LMP1. The landscape of sports car racing has thoroughly seen Mercedes, Toyota, and Jaguar out of the way. This was a new era with a new dynasty. The 2000s and early 2010s were largely dominated by Audi. Audi are the second winningest brand at Le Mans, second only to Porsche. From 2000 until 2014, they had won all but twice at Le Mans. The first time, they lost to Bentley in their Speed 8, which was really in part an Audi under all the bodywork. It had a strong resemblance to and shared some technology with the Audi R8C and had a very similar engine to that in the R8. Since Audi and Bentley share the same parent company, I wouldn't doubt that Audi's world-class resources were grab and go for Bentley. So in order for Audi's reign of dominance to truly be disrupted, well, it just had to be Peugeot. Peugeot had revealed a concept in 2006 and in 2007 pulled back the covers on the final form of their new competitor. This is the 908. Unlike its main rival in Audi, the 908 had a closed cockpit design. It had the trend-setting Formula-style nose pioneered by its elder. Finally, it would run a V12 engine and more crucially would also run a diesel. Peugeot made its race debut at the 2007 1,000 kilometers of Monza. They qualified 1-2 and won the race. They would repeat their win at Valencia. The problem though was that Audi was absent. You see, Peugeot were racing in Europe while Audi had stuck to racing in North America, so the two diesels would only do battle once this year. Despite being quick in testing and qualifying, they were not quick enough in race trim and came second to Audi. Comparatively, they were lacking in both speed in the straights and stability in the corners. Peugeot would finish racing that year in Europe and would win the championship. Audi went back to North America and won their championship. As far as Le Mans, Peugeot would have to try again next year. Cue the 2008 12 Hours of Sebring, where they entered only one car compared to Audi's two. They'd lose more than a few laps due to mechanical failures, but did manage to lead in the early stages. The two heavily backed diesels seemed to be in a class of their own. Their year continued back in Europe, where Audi would now join them to fight. Peugeot would beat Audi 3 times in a row, taking victory at Catalunya, Monza, and Spa. Their mechanical woes seemed to be behind them, and their raw pace was shown to be much better. Come June, Peugeot would again outqualify Audi. This year, a staggering 5 seconds faster than the fastest Audi. Peugeot had the race in their hands until past the halfway mark. Rain would heavily dampen their pace, allowing the then second place Audi to catch up by as much as 8 seconds per lap. Audi would eventually go on to win Le Mans yet again. Further worsening their year, Audi would beat Peugeot in Europe, winning the 2008 Le Mans Series Championship in their inaugural year. Peugeot yet again would have to try again. In 2009, Peugeot arrived to Le Mans in full force with 4 908s. 3 were factory and 1 was from Team Pescarolo. Peugeot would again take the top spot in qualifying. Audi meanwhile arrived with their brand new R15. The R15 at first was plagued with issues as it struggled with double stinting and lots of understeer. Thus, the 2009 24 Hours of Le Mans was comfortably Peugeot's, their first win at Le Mans in 16 years.
Here in France, Peugeot win at home. The French Classic is theirs.
They'd go on to win the International Le Mans Cup in 2010 and 2011. Victories at the 2010 Petit Le Mans and 2011 Sebring 12 Hours would further bookend their career. Prototype regulations did change in 2011, rendering their original Peugeot 908 HDI FAP obsolete, so Peugeot returned with the new 908. In very similar faith to the 905, Peugeot would begin developing a much wilder diesel hybrid version of the 908 for the 2012 season. This was known as the 908 Hybrid 4. Their plan was to debut it at Sebring, having it race ready weeks before the premiere event. Unfortunately, Peugeot pulled the plug last minute on their race program just weeks before the race due to rising costs and the difficult economic environment in Europe. Therefore, Peugeot Sport would take another decade-long hiatus from sports cars before arriving to the hypercar era. If you're watching this channel, you're probably already caught up on Peugeot's latest creation. The 9X8, successor to the 908, bears no resemblance to its predecessors or really anything at all. It's easy to imagine it being far off the pace of its competitors, as other daring designs have been. However, it's clear that Peugeot saw the less prescriptive regulations along with stronger BOP as an opportunity to be experimental while still being in the hunt. For example, according to the regulations, the amount of downforce a car may generate is hard and fast, with no more than a 4:1 downforce to drag ratio. But the constraints in which manufacturers may design their diffuser is very liberal. In short, instead of using a conventional rear wing to generate downforce, the 9X8 adopts the ground effect philosophy. This means that it would create most of its downforce from its underbody. One possible advantage of this would be a lower drag coefficient. It's known that aerodynamic elements are drag-creating devices. That's why low aero builds are always used for tracks that are top-end focused, like Le Mans and Monza. The 9X8 does feature a small rear winglet, as well as exhaust positions on the top, allowing exhaust gases to flow through the aero elements on the surface, increasing the effectiveness of its smaller above-body elements. Engineering principles aside, the design of the car is simply striking. It has been said that Peugeot have built the only true hypercar, in that its design deviates the most from a conventional prototype. A fan favorite in the hypercar era, the 9X8 has won podium since its mid-22 debut, qualifying 4th and finishing an impressive 3rd at Monza this year behind Toyota and Ferrari. It also did lead a decent chunk of the Le Mans 24 Hours. Its low drag package definitely seems to succeed at high-speed tracks. It retired twice in 2022, but this year has crossed the line in every race it started. On the flip side, Peugeot Sport is 5th out of 7th in the WEC Constructors and seems to struggle on tracks that compromise its ground effect, such as Sebring. Let's hope Peugeot continues its upward trajectory with the 9X8, because we're all witnessing history. If the 9X8 can win Le Mans, they'd be only the 6th manufacturer in history to win with 3 totally different cars, behind Porsche, Audi, Ferrari, Jag, and Bentley. Moreover, they would be the only manufacturer in history to win in Group C, LMP1, and Hypercar. You would have to notice Peugeot's daringness. The 905 dared against the dying days of Group C, the 908 dared against the Audi dynasty, and the 9X8 dares against whatever it wants to. How long do you think the 9X8 will stick around? How long do you think Peugeot Sport will continue in sports car racing in general? Thanks so much for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next one.